Okay, as this is the fourth, I think this is the fourth video in my series. All right, continuation of the alternative. No thing can have only one interpretation of meaning intrinsic to it. I've shown in part 1 of my paper that this idea is nonsense. There cannot be an intrinsically unambiguous structure in the mind, nor anywhere, which is capable of imparting the multitude of meaning for, say, enough is enough. The meaning of the remark, enough is clearly a function of its use. Similarly, no thing can have a singular use which is understood at a point instant in time, just as any word or phrase does not have a singular meaning. For example, a ruler can be used to measure something or to prop up a window, etc. Interestingly, the etc. here is the point. I cannot define sets of necessary and sufficient criteria for uses of objects, just as I cannot define sets of necessary and sufficient criteria for meanings of utterances. Notice also that two images that look exactly the same could be very different depending upon the before and after of the situation. For example, a snapshot picture of a man with his hands around a woman's neck could mean he's about to kiss her, but the same picture could also mean that he is about to kill her. The meaning of the image is dependent on the context, the before and after of the situation. Okay, now on to the nature of the meaning of language as applied to skepticism and determinism, the problem of universalizable phrases and meaning. I will now discuss how language functions differently in a philosophical sense, for example, determinism or skepticism, versus the way in which language functions in the flow of life. Skepticism in language. It's interesting to note the difference between the remark, I don't know, as a skeptic uses it, from when it is used within the context of life situations. For example, a skeptic may say, I don't know if the floor is about to cave in, and yet the skeptic would continue to stand on the very same floor. However, a person who says, I don't know if this floor is about to cave in, and is using language with actual reference to the context of the situation, a living use, would certainly move in some way to keep from falling along with the floor. The skeptic's use of language is a context-independent or dead use. Even though it appears as though the skeptic's words are about a situation, they actually are not, because, quote, I don't know if the floor is about to cave in, quote, could apply to any floor in any situation, whether it be a cement slab or a 100-year-old wooden porch. In fact, the skeptic's use of I don't know not only applies to the floor scenario, but to anything or any proposition. I don't know that P, where P can be anything. It is merely an illusion that a skeptic's words are about a situation. There is a world of difference between the two uses of the same utterance, living, context-dependent, and dead, context-independent. If I were a skeptic and repeatedly and universally, context-independently said, for example, I don't know if the roof is going to fall in, or I don't know if I have any more, or I don't know if I'm going to make it to the party, then no one would know what I meant in each instance, and other people wouldn't know whether to stay or run from the roof, or whether or not they needed to go get cash, or whether or not they should expect me at the party. The skeptic always asserts universally, context independently, quote, I do not know, unquote, and thus we can see from the above examples that this universal use robs the phrase, the language, of its contextual meaning. Whereas the living sense of language is quite different. If I said to my husband, for example, I don't know if I have any money, he would assume that I thought I actually did not have any money and would probably, and hopefully, begin searching his wallet, mainly because he knows that I do not use the phrase I don't know if loosely or universally. That is, I don't say, I don't know whether the roof is about to fall in when there is no good reason to presume if it is. If I were a skeptic, it would make no difference whether or not the roof is actually going to fall in, or whether there actually is any money in my wallet. Showing or evidence makes no difference whatsoever. The philosophical use of language is not language at all, but a homonym of language. The words and phrases sound the same, but they lack meaning. The philosophical sentence is parasitic. It tries to steal meaning from the identical sounding sentences used in actual life. If language gets its meaning by context or place in the flow of life, and philosophical language characteristically has the property of being context independent or not being a part of the flow of life, then there is a sense in which philosophical language is meaningless. All right, on to language, determinism, and the free will problem. A. She couldn't have done anything else but. The determinist contends that a person cannot do anything else from a general proposition that no one can do anything but what that person does, as can be seen via the formal logical deduction that, and I'll put this in a title, that is, for every action the action is not free, from which it follows, at the title, for all possible actions. Thus, a determinist is like a skeptic in that what he says about the inevitability of thoughts and behaviors of people is also intended to be universally applicable. The determinist's conclusion, quote, she couldn't have done anything else but what she did, is one that necessarily applies in exactly the same way to everyone at every moment in the entire world, the same kind of universal applicability that the phrase "I don't know" has for the skeptic. For example, the sense in which a determinist says, he couldn't have done anything else but kill that guy, is exactly the same as he couldn't have done anything else but drink his orange juice. Any phrase could be substituted after he couldn't have done anything else but. However, the living use of language is extraordinarily different, an absolute divide. If I said in every situation, oh, he couldn't have done anything else but X, then people would either begin to ignore me or think I was a bit out of my mind, or both. The phrase that is used context independently or universally is one that is empty or meaningless, and the phrase that is part of the living use of language is one that is meaningful, in that it is used differently and dependently on the context of the situation. Philosophical propositions, in fact, are necessarily context independent or universally applicable. Living language is necessarily context dependent or not universally applicable. The following is an example which further illustrates my point. Imagine a lawyer defending a soldier who was a prisoner of war. The soldier is accused of giving the enemy secrets when he was in their custody. In the process of the trial, the lawyer describes all the horrible things that were done to the soldier by his captors and then says, I think we should let the soldier off. He couldn't have done otherwise. Then imagine the same lawyer defending another soldier who was also prisoner of war. The soldier was brought up on the same charges. In the process of this trial, the lawyer tells the jury that the soldier gave the enemy secrets because they refused to put sprinkles on his ice cream. The lawyer then says, I think we should let the soldier off. He couldn't have done otherwise. The above example illustrates the absurdity and inapplicability of the philosophical or dead use of language in the context or flow of life. The only way the phrase, quote, he couldn't have done anything else, could have any meaning is if the lawyer did not use it, for example, in the sprinkles case. In other words, the living use of he couldn't have done anything else is the one that arises when one actually tries to excuse someone by saying that the person couldn't have done anything else, like the tortured soldier case and unlike the sprinkles case. This example also illustrates the difference between the two uses of language. We see that the universal use of he couldn't have done anything else does not carry the weight, the meaning, the sense when applied to the two individual instances in life. The determinist uses the phrase in both instances, which results in nonsense. The phrase sounds the same in both the living and dead use, but only the living use infers or imparts meaning. Almost done as. I think one more and that'll do it.